Russia has been left reeling after Ukraine launched its largest drone and missile assault, yet on the country's capital city, Kyiv, marking a sharp escalation in the ongoing war. Overnight, Russian forces unleashed a massive wave of aerial attacks in what Ukrainian officials described as the most intense bombardment the country has faced since the full-scale invasion began. The strike has resulted in civilian casualties, damage to significant government infrastructure, and renewed calls from Kyiv for international support and harsher sanctions. Late on Sunday into Monday, Russia deployed 810 drones and multiple missiles in a coordinated attack aimed at Kyiv and several other regions. Ukraine's Air Force reported that the majority of the drones and decoys were intercepted. 747 drones and 4 missiles were destroyed before they could strike their intended targets. Despite the heavy defenses, several projectiles got through. In Kyiv, a residential building was struck, killing a young mother and her 3-month-old child. Fire broke out in multiple high-rise buildings. Perhaps most notably, the roof and upper floors of the Ukrainian cabinet building, the seat of government in the historic Pechesky district, were damaged. Smoke was seen rising from its roof, and emergency crews rushed to respond. Local officials, including Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, confirmed that the attacks also struck residential zones in Donetsky and Svatoshinsky districts. Buildings were hit, people are dead, homes are destroyed. Klitschko said, adding that the blast in one apartment block killed the 2 victims. President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the assault as a brutal act and argued that the damage to government infrastructure marks an escalation. "We will restore the buildings," he said, "but lost lives cannot be returned." He appealed to foreign allies for additional air defense support and stronger, more decisive sanctions against Russia. International reactions followed swiftly. French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer publicly denounced the attacks. Starmer described them as cowardly strikes that show a disregard for international norms and civilian welfare. Macron criticized the assault as indiscriminate. Russia, for its part, defended its action. The Kremlin and Moscow's defense ministry said Russian targets were military in nature, drone manufacturing, or logistics hubs, and that civilian harm was not their objective. But Ukrainian authorities and many international observers questioned both the scale of the attack and the targeting. Casualties across Ukraine were not limited to Kyiv. The official tally released by Kyiv lists 4 dead and 44 wounded across various regions. In Kyiv alone, beyond the mother and infant, dozens were injured when drones struck residential buildings or debris rained down. Other cities including Zaporizhia, Kryvyi Rih, Odessa, and regions like Sumy and Chernihiv reported damage. Power outages struck parts of Kyiv, and emergency services faced fires in apartment blocks. Air raid sirens sounded across much of the country, keeping civilians on edge throughout the duration of the assault. Ukrainian air defenses were heavily tested. Officials claim that nearly all incoming drones and missiles were intercepted, yet the ones that broke through caused enough destruction to damage key buildings and kill civilians. Analysts say the strike, particularly the hit on the government building, marks a symbolic as well as military escalation, a gutsy move by Russia to demonstrate reach, and a provocation intended to undermine morale. In the broader context of the war, this attack is being seen as a turning point. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in February 2022, Russia has launched repeated drone and missile assaults, but this one tops them in scale. Prior attacks involved hundreds of aerial drones. Only now has the number pushed past 800 combined with missile launches in the same sweep. Ukrainian authorities have emphasized the urgency of strengthening air defense systems. NATO and EU allies are under heavy pressure from Kyiv to supply additional anti-aircraft weapons, counter-drone technologies, and more radar and detection capacity. Without bolstering of defences, they warn, civilian infrastructure and government facilities may increasingly become vulnerable. On the strategic front, the attack raises several questions about how Russia views the war at this moment. Observers suggest that Moscow may be prioritizing psychological impact and domestic messaging, damaging government buildings, signals capability and intent. It may be intended both to disrupt governance and to demonstrate that no location is immune. Some analysts suggest it is meant to erode domestic confidence in Ukraine's ability to protect its capital. At the same time, such large-scale operations consume significant resources, and their frequency may strain Russian air capacity. Meanwhile, Ukrainians are confronted again with the human cost. Families have lost homes, lost loved ones. Civilians and first responders have scrambled through the night to put out fires, treat the wounded, clear rubble. Aid organizations and local volunteer networks have mobilized, distributing emergency supplies, providing psychological support, and helping rebuild what was destroyed. The trauma of such an attack reverberates long after the fires are extinguished. The international diplomatic fallout may soon follow closely. Ukraine's allies are likely to demand accountability both in international forums and via sanctions. There is growing discussion in European capitals over whether existing sanctions are enough, or whether new, sharper penalties on Russia's oil, gas, and financial sectors are needed. Some countries have already signaled willingness to deepen restrictions. Questions are also being raised about how this will affect peace talks, if at all. Ukraine has long insisted that any negotiation must come without compromising its sovereignty or sacrificing its territorial integrity. Russia, meanwhile, often frames its strikes as retaliation or as part of its declared war objectives. Whether this scale of attack galvanizes renewed diplomatic efforts or hardens positions remains uncertain. From the Kremlin's perspective, damage to the Cabinet of Ministers building represents a propaganda blow. If indeed the roof and upper floors were hit, as reported, that undercuts claims of precision or restraint. If civilian casualties continue, international reaction may intensify. Moscow will have to weigh the gains from a show of power against the risk of further global isolation. For Kyiv, this is a moment of both loss and defiance. President Zelensky has expressed both grief and determination. We will rebuild, he said, and we will hold our partners to account. Citizens have rallied, with many working through the night to support rescue operations, tend to the wounded, and restore essentials. Resilience in many accounts remains high, even as fear and uncertainty mount. In some, the strike is more than just another salvo. It appears to be a calculated attempt to escalate, to break defenses, to test both Ukraine's capacity to cope and the resolve of its international backers. As dawn breaks over Kyiv after this most devastating attack, the war shows signs of entering a perilous new phase.